Hello everyone and welcome to Counselor Feature Friday. I'm your host, Brian Urban. In these features we hope to give you some simple tips, tidbits, and tricks to make your days easier and your patients happier. In this feature we're going to talk about counselor security tools. We're going to focus on two primary areas. The first being the tools that you have access to right away, specifically within a staff member's security profile and the different options that you have regarding that. Then we're going to look at some of the behind the scenes and some of the company-wide controls that are available upon request. So we'll start here by going to Administration in the top menu bar and selecting User List. We'll pick any user here. And then we, of course, can go ahead and click on the security. But before we do, I should mention that, of course, you have full access to who can access Counselor, and you can turn off that access at a moment's notice. So if you ever need to disable someone, you simply just pop into their profile, uncheck this box, and click Save, and then they are locked out right away. Okay, so you have that ability at your fingertips anytime. Now, of course, in the security tab, there's a lot more control. So under the clinic access, you can designate if specific staff members should only have access to data for specific clinics. Now, they will be able to see the patients across the whole company, right across all the clinics, but they wouldn't be able to create, let's say, an invoice in a clinic where they're not assigned, or they wouldn't be able to modify a visit in a clinic where they're not assigned. So it gives you some control there. Now, the second area, the dashboard widgets, the widgets are largely controlled. I should say that the widgets that each user has is largely controlled by their security settings. So you would go about setting the security settings first, and then if you find, there's a widget I'm still not crazy about them having, you as a owner, manager, administrator have the ability to pull back access on that widget as well. But looking specifically at the different kind of areas within the security feature, we're not going to go through all of these, of course, but there's a great deal of control in here. The most important by far is going to be this first one, the company administration. That's really where individuals who have a high-level company administration, the view, add, update, or the view, add, update, delete, have the ability, of course, add new users to the system as well as disable access for other individuals as well. You also can update people's passwords. You being that high-level administrator have that level of control. When it gets down to different areas, of course, then it gets very topic specific. So we're talking about patient visits versus patient policies and devices and invoices. And within each one of these, of course, you can deny access entirely. You can say they can look at it, but they can't touch. You can also say, yep, you can view it, you can add it, you can update it. Of course, the highest level control also includes the ability to delete that. So you are able to grant the ability to delete certain things. For example, you can allow someone to be able to delete appointments, right? If they're working on the schedule a lot, they can delete appointments, but you don't want them to be able to delete invoices. Right? That's fully up to you. Now, a higher level control beyond that is who can see aggregate business data. And that's controlled through the business reporting area off to the right here. That's where you can say, if you want someone to have business reporting access for all clinics, if you have multiple locations or specific clinics in that same scenario, or no access at all, right? And this is where individuals can then see all the appointments all time, all the invoices all time. There are dashboard widgets specifically designated for this level of control, so you can see that aggregate business data. So this is also an area that you would guard fairly closely, right? Not everyone probably would likely have access to this. Depends on your individual needs within your clinic, though, of course. By the way, with any of these areas, if you want to, chat about them further, what they mean, how they work, you can always reach out to our support team. We're happy to talk these through with you as well. Now, as we go down here, we can see that you also have control over who can see cost of goods. That doesn't speak directly to security, but a preference you may want to take advantage of. Of course, also controlled access to NOAA. And then this is actually something you may not have seen or may not be aware of, and that's multi-factor authentication. This really gets to the heart of security in that you have an ability to put a secondary control in place. So you may be familiar with this already with your banking website or different systems like that, where you then need to use like a separate device to finalize the login process, and that's what Counselor does. It works with Google Authenticator, so that you would use your smartphone. Smartphone pops up a code, and then in addition to entering your username and password, you'd also be filling in that code. So it's just another way that you can implement that will further define or further restrict who has access to Counselor and ensure that only the proper people are logging in. Okay, so those are the tools you have available at your fingertips right now. In addition, you have the ability to request some other features. We're talking about the ability to force a password reset, right? And you can set your interval for that. So if you said, you know, I'm concerned my staff members aren't changing their password often enough, I'm going to put in a forced control that says, hey, every 60 days or 30 or 90 or 120, whatever you want, or 87, you can get that specific with it. I need them to be required to change their password. Okay, so that's fully up to you. You can communicate that to us. It takes our support team a very short amount of time to put that control in place. You also have the ability for a session timeout. So if you said, all right, if a computer is idle for a certain amount of time, let's have them automatically logged out of Counselor. Once again, it's a very short process for us to enter that. You would just tell us what your preference is. On this note, I would also recommend that you look at your individual workstations and put in logout features within those computers. So if a computer is idle and it's sitting there with, you know, NOAA and Counselor and manufacturer websites open, that after a certain amount of time it signs out. So that way anyone who approached that computer would need to log back in. That's just kind of a simple security technique that's going to cover you across whatever you're doing on that device beyond Counselor. But of course within Counselor itself, you can set session timeouts, or we can assist you with that. The last area here is the IP filtering. This talks about the address or range of addresses that are generated by your internet modem. If you're not familiar with this, your IT people certainly will be. What ultimately what this does is it lets you restrict who can log into Counselor and where, right? So if you can say, okay, certain staff members can log into Counselor, but only when they're in the office, only when they're in with this IP range. And actually, I should say this. Actually, should say IP address filtering. I didn't fill it out totally. And then those people who can log in the office, if they try to log in from home, would not be able to do so. Okay, but you could set that on a staff member by staff member basis. So it's another thing where you can work with your IT team to determine what your IP address range is. You can communicate that to us, and then we're happy to put that in place on your behalf, do some testing, and make sure you have that security setting in place. Okay, if you do have that in place, let's look at the user settings again. There will be an additional option within the security profile that will state whether or not that specific staff member is subject to the IP address filtering. Okay, once again, with all of these areas, please reach out to us if you have any questions or if we can assist in any way. We're always happy to talk this through and help out. So thank you very much for joining us for today's Counselor Feature Friday, and as always, have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.